And then I have this little village set. So I think this will be really fun to do. I'm going to use one of these little houses. I think I'm actually using this one right here. And then this large tree set. So when you want to put a big old oak in your Bible, you can do that with these trees. And then this tiny, tiny little foliage set. And that's to do these backgrounds. So you can see all these little foliages back here in the background. And you'll be able to do that with these small, small little foliages. And then people. So check out, I'm on Facebook twice a month, the first and third Wednesday of every month, and I'm doing watercolor. So I will be going through all of these new watercolor sets. So if you want to see more information and see how to put those together, follow me on Facebook. I'm also on YouTube. There are lots and lots of tutorials on YouTube on how to watercolor, and any of those projects can be incorporated into your Bible. So it just works. So I'm going to now move this out of the way. Now let me tell you what verse has kind of inspired this page. And it is this one. This is Psalm 27, and it says, I believe that I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage and wait for the Lord. And I put a little tiny scene in here to kind of tie everything together. And it just, to me, it's the whole peaceful scene of this background. I think that, when our hearts are, when we're scared, when we need to take courage, we think about the goodness of the Lord, and that gives us peace. And that's why I kind of chose this verse and this peaceful background back in here, and then tied that verse back in. So let's get going on this project. I want to show you guys how to stamp this and how to put this together. So I've got my palette here. So I may be moving this around a little bit just to make sure everything is in there. And I've got my palette right here on the side. So the palette is just a piece of acrylic like this, white, and it's a great way to mix color, and that's what we're going to be using. Okay, so let me just try to move this up a little bit here. Okay, I think I'm finally situated, you guys. Okay, here we go. So we're going to start out by stamping the basic image, and that is this large image with the creek and the hills in the background. So what I'm going to do is stamp the rocks and the creek. I'm going to ink those first, and I'm going to start out with the blue, like this dark blue. And I'm just going to ink this whole thing with this dark blue. Just going to go over the whole, all of these lines here. And then I'm going to go over it again with the dark brown. Now this is the dark brown, the 969. And I'm going to go over it again, but only the rocks. Just the rocks, not the creek lines. So just these rocks right here. And that's all I'm going to ink right now. And then I'm going to stamp it off. So I don't want this to be too dark. So now I'm going to stamp that off so I don't have too much ink on here. And now I'm going to go back in and use my light gray. This is just a very, very light gray. And I'm just going to go back in here now and get about this much of these lines. Not the whole thing. I don't need the whole thing, but just about here, maybe here and to here. And now I can take that and stamp it into my Bible. Okay, just like that. So you can see these light lines in the background. The reason I use that really light gray is because we're probably going to stamp over the top, especially if we add some little structures in here. And we want those lines to be really, really light. Okay, so now we're going to add our little structures in. So here's the little barn, and I'm going to just use my my positioner and make sure that I get this in the right space. And I'm just going to ink this now with one color. So this is that same dark brown. And the reason that we stamp it off, so I'm going to stamp this off too. I'm going to stamp this off onto a piece of scrap paper because I don't want it too dark. If you get the lines too dark, you've got too much color coming out. And I think I will actually put this back in here about like this. I think that's about right. And see, I'm stamping it over that gray line, but it's okay because it's really, really light. And that's about how you want it. You don't want these lines super dark for a couple of reasons. Number one, like I said, it's too much color. And number two, we don't want to see an outline of the building. We want it to look really, really natural. And the goal is that we have a little watercolor painting in here. And you know, you want to give this Bible away to someone. You want to make it special for someone. I have 6 grandchildren. And so I'm working in 6 Bibles because I want all 6 of them to have one. So, I do a little bit in one, I do another one in another, and I want to make these for my little grandkids. So I've stamped this one off now too, and I'm going to do this little house, and I'm going to place it, I think right here, actually. I think that's a good spot. And I can just huff on it. I don't need to re-ink it again once I've stamped it on there. And now I've got my little structures all ready to go here. So let's take a pencil now, and you can see the way that these are set up. So it's lines and hills is just how this goes. And I'm going to add another one back in here and another one back in here. Let's see how easy that is. I just created these 2 lines, so we're kind of following this contour of this. And then we're going to do another one just right down in here. Okay, so just like that. Can everybody see that okay? Let me move this up just a little bit more so you guys can see. I don't want to be off the page. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add water now to this scene. And I've got a little container of water just like this. I've got it off to the side because I want to make my project as big as I can. But every time I dip my brush, I pinch it off. So I dip it in water and then I pinch it off so that I don't have too much water. You want to make sure that your brush is pretty dry. See how flat that is? You want to make sure your brush is dry. So when you go to pull the color out of the lines, you're not getting too much water in here. And I'm just going to start following these lines and pulling this color out. It's just the simplest thing, you guys. Just nothing to it. Just start out simple like this and, just keep moving your way around. Now, this will, you can put this aside. So you can, maybe you don't have time, when you're reading through these verses, maybe you don't have time to finish the whole project, but you could get it stamped. You could get it all stamped, and then you can do it later. So take it with you. If you're going on vacation, stamp your page with all your basic images, and then take your little flowers and foliages and all of that, and finish it up when you're sitting on a beach somewhere, or sitting in a hotel room looking out the window. Super fun. So now we're going to do the rocks. Now the thing about the rocks is these are domes. So what that means is that you have a highlight, and you're going to have a highlight at the top. So you're going to concentrate the color on the bottom. Now these are going to have a mix of color. Remember, we inked these with 2 colors in the very beginning. So they're going to have some brown and they're going to have some blue in them. And it's going to create a really, really nice gray. And that's why we use 2 different colors, is because one color, using a single color, it just doesn't give you enough dimension and doesn't make it look realistic enough. Now you see how that, I'm just going to lift this up a little bit so you can really see the highlights on those rocks. When you pull the color to the bottom like that, you automatically make them look more realistic. They just look way more realistic when you do that. And round. If you color them all in solid, they're going to be flat. They're just going to be flat. And you will have lost your, the whole concept of the rocks and the creek. So now I'm dipping my brush again, and I'm just going to now pull the color out of the lines where this little creek goes. Just follow these little blue lines, and we can add some more color to this later. So just keep pulling that color out. We're just kind of still in the starting stages. And as you go, take your time and, enjoy the process, because it really is, it really isn't stressful at all. Especially when you kind of know what the process is, and you know how to stamp, and you know how to pull the color out of the lines. And I think that takes, a lot of the stress out of it. Okay, so now let's keep going here. And we're gonna start adding some color now to some of these, to the little barn and the house and the rocks. And I'm gonna take some of this yellow. This is actually kind of a mustard yellow. It's a number 26 of the Tombos. And I'm going to make sure that I can get this so you guys can see my palette. Maybe I'll just put it up here like this. And I'm gonna take some of this yellow and some dark blue. So this is that same dark blue and a little of the dark brown, like this, and some more of the light brown. And then we can add our greens in a little bit. So right now we're going to focus on the rocks a little bit. And actually, maybe I will add some green. Add some green up in here. Now this is a kind of an olive green, so it's a number 27. And I'm going to just add a little color now to the rock. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of this yellow, just a little bit, and add it to my rocks. Just and concentrate the color down below. So you don't want to put any color at the top. Remember, that's got to have that highlight on there. So add a little yellow like that, and then maybe some green to make them a little mossy. Just a little bit of green, just a tiny bit. And I'm just using the very tip of my brush just to put a little color on here. You know, the thing about these too is that once you start doing some of these, maybe you start out with just a simple wreath. You know, start out with a simple wreath or a simple border, but you'll get your confidence up and you'll be ready to try something a little more complicated. You know, I can even see a difference in my six Bibles I've been working in because I've changed a lot. You know, my style has changed a little bit, and I can see that, you know, I do things a little differently just since doing it in my Bible. Okay, so you can see we've got that texture now in the rocks. And I'm going to now add some blue from my palette into this little creek here. So it's going to be, you know, it's going to be darker here where it's in the back, where it's kind of going behind this little house. And actually we can just add it right in here too. So we're just going to come down and around. Be careful that you don't touch, you know, the rocks with this blue. You really don't want to touch this too much so you don't get that color bleeding out. And it's okay to have some, you know, white spots in here too. And we can make some little motion lines here. You know, you're just creating the idea of it. So don't stress about this too much. Don't worry so much about it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take that same blue and we're going to put a shadow in to this house in the barn. So just pick a side, you know, pick a side that will be the dark side and that will be in the shadow. And I'm just going to pick this side here and add some blue to it like this. And you'll see once you do this, you're automatically going to see your little image become more three-dimensional. And you can pull some of this, you know, brown out too. That's totally fine. And then under the overhang here, you know, this is going to have a little shadow under here. Same over here. That's going to be really, really, really dark under here. And then let's go ahead and add some color now to the roof. And I'm just using a little of this light brown. You know, when you're doing the roof, remember the top of the image should have a highlight. So always try to, you know, resist the urge to color everything in solid. You're going to be much happier if you leave some white spaces. It's going to create more texture. Your image isn't going to look flat. It really, really does make a difference. And I'm doing this all with a number 4. It's a number 4 brush. And it's just a simple watercolor round tip brush. So I'm just adding a little bit more color now to the roof. And like I said, take your time. It's a really fun process. It really is. Really relaxing. So I'm going to put some color now into the door here. And now I really want to darken these windows up. And that's going to really make a difference too. So I'm going to take a fine tip. This is my twin tone. And it's a very fine tip marker. So it's water-based, just like the other ones that I used. And I'm just going to make my little windows here. And if you can do it really, make it really tiny, you can add a little detail in these windows. So just something like that. And if you want to, you can add another one because you're using your little marker. So you can kind of change it up. So, and the same over here. I'm just gonna do the same with these little windows. Just create a little detail in here. And, you know, come in here with your fine tip, because anytime you can really make these areas dark, it's going to add more dimension to your image. You can see how they really popped out, didn't they? Just adding that fine tip in there. So dark under the eaves like this, that's always going to be dark, and then dark inside the windows. Okay, so let's go on from here, and let's put some of our landscape in. So I'm going to use one of these stamps. This is from the Tiny Little Foliage set, and I'm going to just put this on a block and ink this up. And all I'm going to do is kind of follow my line. So I'm just going to take this now and just kind of follow it all the way down. And the same back here. And now we've created these hills and kind of a little boundary now behind the hill. So now I can take my brush, dip it. So I'm dipping it in my water, and I'm always pinching it off. And I'm just going to kind of dab a little bit at this. So make sure your brush isn't too wet. And then just pull your brush along the bottom and drag some of that color out. Just kind of drag it out. And then go on to the next one back here. And then do the same. Just drag your brush along the bottom and pull some of that color out. Just nothing to it. And if you want to, now you could add something in the background, light even more. And you could just kind of keep going. So you could do like maybe a little light, you know, idea of a hill back in here. And start out light. You know, it's always better to start out light. It's not as intimidating. And then you can always come back in later and add more color. So I'm going to, I think now, put some greens onto my palette. So I'm going to just turn my palette around here and add some green. This is the light green, so this is the number 177. And then I'm going to add some more of this one. This is the 27. And then the dark greens. This is the cool green. This is the 249. So, you know, it's really fun to mix your greens. Put them on your palette and just kind of mix it up so you get some different colors. Different colors going on. And just kind of brush this in. You don't have to brush in the whole thing, but just a little bit. And then maybe we'll take some of this cool color here. in here like this. So we're kind of making these little hills back in the background. And then we can do the same thing here with this little hill and around this little barn. And I'm just going to put a little bit back in here. And I know this is a little bit blurry, but when we get it onto YouTube, you'll be able to see it much, much clearer. So that's another reason why we're recording it again, so that you get a really clear image. So bear with me. Okay, so now I've got some green in here. I'm adding a little more color, just kind of right around where those little structures are. And a little bit more down here. We made this little line here, so we've got more going on down here. And you can just, add as much of this. You don't need to do the whole page. You really don't. So you can see it's kind of coming together now. So let's add some more foliage in here. We're going to add some trees. And I'm going to use this little tiny one. There is a new, in the new foliage set, there are some tiny little trees that work so great. And there's a right and a left. So you'll be able to do the right and the left. And then let's just put something in here. How about right in here? And then I'm going to add some foliage now to it. So some of the leaves. And you just need to tap this in here a couple of times and it's done. One, two. And the same with this little guy in here. And you can just change these up. Every time you do this scene, it's going to be a little bit different because there's so many options and so many ways that you can use these little stamps. Create these little scenes, peaceful little scenes. And then just, every time you stamp it, you want to add a little water to it. Just stamp it and dab at it. Remember to pinch your brush off so you don't get too much water. Okay, so now I'm going to take my little tiny grass. The little grass is in the very first flower and foliage set. And I'm just going to tap this in. And I'm just really using the top because I want it to be really small. These little structures are way in the background. And then I can add some in here where the rocks are. So I can just tap some in here like this. And maybe some right along here. And as soon as you stamp it, then you can add some water to it and just kind of blend it out. It will just kind of do its thing. Add more texture, add more color, add more dimension. And like I said before, I will be on YouTube and Facebook with all of these new little scenes and new stamp sets. So feel free to check those out. They will stay archived on there too. So if you can't make it for the live, it's at 10 o'clock Pacific time on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of the month. Check out the YouTube tutorials because those will be archived on there. And they are archived on Facebook too. So. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more color now to the sides of these little structures and really get these in the shade here. And just kind of mess up the white a little bit. Even though it's a little white barn, you don't want to just leave it completely white. So let's add something else in here now. Let's add some little fences. Love these little guys. And they can just kind of be placed anywhere. Maybe one right here and one right here. And you can always put another post in. So if you've got one like this, you can just put another post in just like this and darken these up. If there's one that's not finished, and continue it like that. So I'm just using my, my fine tip. And just kind of continuing that fence over. So easy. Okay, let's finish up this foreground here. And we're just going to use the large grass now. And just kind of walk it along. So we've got the background, and now as we come forward, the grasses, the image is getting larger. And so I'm just going to stamp this and then pull that color out. And you can use anything in the foreground. Any flowers, anything that you have. Trees, blooms. These are some from some of the watercolor flower sets. So you can ink these up. And whatever bright colors that you want to use. And how cute would this be for fall too? So you could change up these colors and you could use them for fall. There are a lot of flowers that you could use in the beginning flower set as well. So the Bible journaling flower set has a lot of little blooms that you can use. And these too, you want to stamp them and then just touch them with a little bit of water just to kind of soften up the lines. So you're just touching it. You don't want to really lose the integrity, you know, of the image. So you want to kind of see the shape of the image, but you just want to soften it up so that it looks more like a watercolor. And how about one more here? Let's do this one. Maybe something bright with the red. I'm just coloring the bloom and the stem. And just stamping this in here a couple of times. Maybe one more, a couple more. And then just touch it, just the blooms. So not the stem. You want to just touch the bloom with your brush. And I can just add a few more little grasses in here too. You know, these sets are all made to be a collection so that the more pieces that you have, the more options you have for your compositions. So they're going to all work together. You can pick and choose different pieces that will work to create these scenes. That's why there's so many options now and so many different ways that you can make these. And they're going to be different every time. Let's just put a little sky in here, just the idea of it. And maybe let's just darken this just a little bit. And you could even add a little more detail here in the background. So maybe we want to just put some little crops growing back here. Just the idea. And finish off our little farm scene. And you could, you know, you could just touch these little posts too. You don't really have to do much with these, you know, these little fences. They're pretty simple. So you really don't want to add any water to the crossbars at all. And then I usually just go through it, you know, again, right before I'm finished and just see if there's anything else that I want to add in here. Maybe I'll just add a little more green. back in here. You could also add a little green to the water, you know, as it's kind of coming around. And a little more to the rocks. Be sure when you're doing those rocks, that's probably the most important thing, is to make sure that you are not coloring that highlight. Now see, I'm coming in here with my tiny little black, or this is the dark brown. It's the same dark brown that we used to begin with. It's a very fine tip. And this is, you guys, my best friend. I use this thing all the time because it makes such a difference to get those dark areas in and create more dimension. Now you can see how that really just kind of separates these rocks and pops them out a little bit more. Make sure under the eaves, your little buildings, make sure those areas are really dark. Okay, I think we are finished with this little project, and I hope you guys give it a try. I'm going to turn my camera around now and turn my camera around, flip this thing around.